Oh, we're talking to you about the year 1934. The dismal depths of the Depression. And Ralph Jr. graduated from high school in Presque, Maine, and he looked for a job. And he looked for a job in every town in Aroostook County. He looked and he looked and he waited and he waited, and there was never any job. My father looked for a job. There was no job. There was no job. No income. So, in the middle of the night, we packed up in a car and we heated some logs in the oven of the kitchen stove and put the logs in the back seat of the car for Gordon's feet and for Glendora's feet. And we set out in the deep, deep night. And it was in deep winter, too. December, January. And we chugged along Route 2, and we got as far as Holton. And this was quite an experience for Glendora, because she had never been out of her house other than go downtown maybe now and then. She had never been out of her house or stayed in anybody else's house or ever eaten in a restaurant. So this was quite an experience for Glendora. Why did we leave Presque to go to Lincoln, Maine? Ralph Arnold Jr., the only job he could find was in Lincoln, Maine, and that was something like 160 miles south, through the woods, through the heavy, heavy woods, down to Lincoln, Maine, because Charlie Minton, who was a barber, needed a helper, and he was willing to pay $7 a week to the helper barber. And so my daddy and my mom, they dropped everything and picked up us too. They left Helene in Presque, and Ralph Arnold Jr. was already in Lincoln.
Yellow House?
What was that, dear?
Yellow House?
Oh, yes. And Ralph Arnold Jr. found us a great big yellow house. And it had maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms upstairs. And downstairs it had a huge bedroom and a huge living room and a huge parlor and a huge kitchen. But no central heating. In that cold, cold winter, I mean, it is cold up there. Much colder than it is where you are now. And in that cold, cold winter, we had to live practically in the kitchen, because that's where the kitchen stove was, and that's where the wood stove was, and that was the only heat that we had. And that's the only way we got heat with hot water, was to heat it on the kitchen stove.
3rd grade?
What was that, honey?
3rd grade?
Yes. And Glennie had gone through half of 3rd grade up in Presque, so she enrolled in the second half year in 3rd grade, and the teacher was Miss Munson. And I remember she taught us multiplication, the nines table, 9 times 9, 9 times 8, 9 times 6.
Snow sled.
What was that, dear?
Snow sled? Riding on a sled in the snow?
Oh, yes. And some of the children who had larger income families, they had a Yankee Flyer snow sled, and that was pretty fancy. That was like having a Cadillac or a Lincoln in Lincoln, Maine. But I had an ordinary sled, and here's what you did with it, folks. You put it on your side like this. You're at the top of the hill. You ran as fast as you could. As soon as the downslope started, you slammed the sled onto the snow. You dropped yourself onto the sled, belly down, and that's how you got your thrill, your ride down the hill. And we had, in the springtime and the summer,
1 o'clock p.m., 75.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you, little temperature clock. We had marbles. They didn't call them marbles down Maine. They called them glassies. They were beautiful glass balls. Some were called cat's eyes because they looked like cat's eyes. And here's how you played it in the springtime. You'd take your heel and you'd grind your heel into the soft soil until you had a hole. And then you would place your marble about 6 feet from the hole. And then the skill came in and shooting your marble into the hole. Only you didn't use the marble, you used a clay substitute. They call those clays. And then if you shot your clay into the hole, then you won the marble that was in the hole.
Elastics.
What was that?
Elastics?
Oh, yes. We call them glassies. Nobody else ever called them. It was a colloquialism, and there were several colloquialisms. Down everywhere else, they called them rubber bands, but we called them elastics. There were several of these colloquialisms.
Oh.
And, yeah.
Go ahead. You still talking about elastics?
What was that?
You still talking about elastics or no?
Yes, I've done it.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Upholstery tack.
Well, Gordon had a upholstery tack, and he put it in the screen, and he was doing something with inhaling the upholstery tack and thrusting it out again and trying to get into the screen. He was playing some kind of a game, and he swallowed the upholstery tack. And, they're pretty big. The doctor said, well, just let it go, and it did. At night, it was so cold. In the upstairs bedrooms, there were no radiators. So you had a little heat came up from the kitchen through an open radiator through the ceiling. And my mother used to heat pieces of wood that were this long, split wood that we had to split. And she would heat those and wrap them in blankets and put them into the bed. And so that we could get into the bed and stand it and go to sleep there. And of course, in the morning, it was icy cold. We had Saturday night baths, folks. We'd had our bath in the kitchen in a tub because there wasn't any running hot water, and all the water had to be heated on the stove. I don't ever remember seeing my brother naked, though. I don't know how my mother did that. He was first, and then I was second. But I don't know how she did that. And then what else did we want to tell everybody?
Borders.
Gordon?
Borders. Did you take borders into your house?
Yes, that's $7 a week. Did that go far on a family of 4? So my mother took in boarders because the Great Northern Paper Company was in Lincoln, Maine, the mill. And people from all over Maine were just as impoverished as we were. And so they came to Lincoln because there weren't any jobs in their hometowns. They came to Lincoln for the job at the mill, and they had to have a place for room and board, and my mother did that. And she worked so hard, taking care of the bedding and taking care of the laundry and cooking their meals.
Monopoly game?
Well, it was the year that Monopoly came out. Parker Brothers came out with a Monopoly game. Naturally, we couldn't afford one. But we got a big piece of plywood. And we sanded it down and varnished it. And then from the mill, we got colored paper. blue paper, green paper, yellow paper that was in the waste baskets. And the people who worked at the mill would bring home these scraps. And then we would make the monopoly, like Illinois, Indiana, Park Avenue, all of those, all the way around the monopoly board. And we had an old underwriter typewriter that was wide open. It wasn't enclosed in any way. And by hitting that typewriter hard, we could type the name, like, for instance, Park Avenue, and the cards that you got when you shook your dice and you got a card. We made those cards and cut them out. We worked on it every night after supper in that cold, cold winter, and the boarders worked on it too. And we finished it. The only thing that we ever bought was the die, the 2 dice. Everything else we made by hand.
Culvert.
You know those culverts that they have going over a ditch? If the road is going this way and there's a gully in the road, well, and the water's coming perpendicular to it, and you can't let the water go over the top of the road. It's got to go underneath the road, and they would have a gully. They would have a pipe that was about this big. It made of very inexpensive metal, and it would go under the road. We thought it was a great game and a great stunt and a great credit to us to crawl through that pipe that was about this around, from the left side of the road to the right side of the road.
Ralph fell on his head?
Oh, yes, back in Prescott in a fertilizer shed, Ralph Edward was showing what a great acrobat he was, and he was walking on a beam up in the ceiling, and he fell off that beam onto a concrete floor and hit his head, and the rest of his life he held a bump on his head as big as a plum.
Second-hand clothes?
Yes, all of our clothes came from rich relatives in Massachusetts. My uncle was an engineer for Scratch Chocolates, and they had money, and they would not wear their clothes until they were unwearable and full of holes and raggedy. They were able to wear their clothes for a season, and then they sent the used clothes to us.
Ballard Hill?
Ballard Hill was the school that Gordon went to, and Ralph went to, and I went to the elementary school, and the 3rd grade teacher was Miss Munson, and the 4th grade teacher was Miss Burr, and Miss Burr taught us long division. And Miss Burr, on Washington's birthday, gave us a picture of a hatchet and a picture of a cherry tree commemorating George Washington's chopping down of the cherry tree. And I colored mine very, very hard, and I wanted my colors to be deep and strong. I didn't like these flimsy, light-colored. And I did it so hard and worked on it so assiduously that it was put in the drugstore with 5 or 6 other students' papers. It was put in the drugstore, in the window. And I thought that was the greatest, that was as good as being on the Super Bowl, of which there wasn't any then.
Fire at night?
What, dear?
Fire at night?
What at night?
Fire?
Oh, there was a house about a block away caught on fire. It was a tenement house. It had about 10 apartments all in a row. And it caught on fire. And my mother made us stay up and watch the fire from the living room window. And then she made us get all dressed in case the fire spread to us. And we watched it and watched it in terror. But it didn't spread. They managed to get it out. And the next day I went down and looked at the house that had been burned, and the kitchen wall was burned, the kitchen table was burned, and it was very, very ugly.
Dump?
What, dear?
Dump?
Dump. No, on Main Street, Route 2, going through Lincoln up from Bangor. Main Street were all the stores, and there were maybe 10 stores. And now the First National store, the Five and Dime store, all the stores were in a row, and they were just little stores. And the backs of them were between the house that was on fire and our house, and they would just throw things out the back door. That was their dump. And they never picked them up. And we children, would watch that dump and watch some of the things that were thrown away, and we could find a use for some of them.
Okay, and the last thing on the list is empty house.
And below us was a twin house, and it was as big as our house, with the 5 bedrooms upstairs and the 4 rooms downstairs. But it never got rented. Nobody ever rented, and that house was empty. And I used to have the most mysterious visits into that empty house and go way upstairs. It was unlocked. It was quite an experience to go into a great big empty house like that.
Anything else you want to say from this time period?
I don't think so. Do you have anything?
Oh, that's everything on your list.
The man at the First National store, which later became Stop and Shop, was mean. And he was mean to little Ralph Arnold Folsom Jr. He was a mean employer. But Ralph had to stick up with it because it was the only job he found in the whole state, remember? There was a Ford dealer in Lincoln on Main Street. No other notes, honey?
That's all the notes.
And what year was it again? 1936 and 1937, Bob Hope was just making his appearance. Shirley Ross, Bing Crosby. A postage stamp was 3 cents. And it was purple. And it had a picture of a president on it. I think it was George Washington. And the 2-cent one had Abraham Lincoln or something like that. And it was red. And the 1 cent was green.